Welcome to episode 12 of Norrice Lea TV. Well, tonight we will be meeting Claire Lemer, US trustee as they celebrate their sesquicentenary, real word, 150th anniversary. Oh yeah. Then we meet Shimon Cohen, the head of Shechita UK, to discuss the future of kosher meat in Europe. And then we have a nice chat, a bit of a sing-song, with the Ahmen boys.
That's right. So yeah, you did it. You said that word, 150 years. Could you believe? That's a long time that the United Synagogue became an entity, an organization. And it's interesting how they recognized, I think there were 4 of them originally, right? 4 shuls that decided to say, okay, let's, bond together and work together to for Jewry, right? To make a better Jewry in the UK.
Yeah, and that's the umbrella organization of all the United Synagogue shuls, and it's the largest synagogue body, I think, in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when we came from the States, it was such a phenomenon for us because each shul in North America was really its own entity. To come to an umbrella organization that really encompasses all aspects of shuls was quite fascinating, and there's so many positives to it. Having this similarities where we can learn from each other, and the different guidelines that we can rely on each other. So there's really this uniform continuity that occurs. So it's really a fascinating feat. And so we actually in our show we are so fortunate to have a female U.S. trustee as our member, Claire Lemer, and I interviewed her as to what it is. What does it mean to become a U.S. trustee? How did she get involved? So let's talk to Claire Lemer. We are very honored this evening to have Claire Lemer join us on our Norrice Lea TV. Claire is a pediatric consultant and as well as a U.S. trustee. And as we're celebrating the 150th anniversary of the establishment of the United Synagogue, we felt it was very apropos to have Claire join us. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
So Claire, let's start with telling us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
So I've lived pretty much all my life in the suburb. My parents moved here when I was around a year old. And so I've always been connected with the synagogue. And my grandparents on my father's side lived in Norrice Lea. And so for me, going to synagogue was very much, particularly as a child, about that connection to my grandparents and to my family, as well as the actual interaction with the synagogue.
Yeah, it's amazing. Your dad has been involved in the children's services. Was it 40 years now?
So he corrected me. It's actually 41 years, which I think probably makes him amongst the longest serving supporters of any children's service, never mind just ours. And while some people might say that that's more than any volunteer should ever have to do, I think secretly he rather loves it. And I think it's giving him immense pleasure at the moment that he's starting to see children of people who, as children themselves, came to the synagogue and now come to his service. So there's a lovely sort of life cycle story going on there, which he really appreciates. So I think it's a rather magical thing to have been part of for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my daughter was one of his children in the services and really enjoyed his questions and very much involved in her involvement in there. So it was very much appreciated. So tell us, how did you get involved with the United Synagogue? How did you become trustee? Going to shul is one thing, but then working behind the scenes, how does that how does that happen?
So it really started with a number of different events, but various life events for me led me to engage in the Jewish world beyond the synagogue itself, and to start to open my eyes to how they actually functioned. And then I did a program for young leaders in the Jewish community And as a result of that, I was asked by the then chair of Norrice Lea to be involved in one of the strategy updates that they were doing, which is probably 10 plus years ago. And that led to my becoming part of the board in the synagogue for a number of years. And simultaneously with that, because of that strategic piece of work, but also because of the Young Leadership Program, I was asked when Elaine Sachs was thinking about revitalizing US Women, which was a group which was created many, many years ago. I think it would probably be close to 50 years ago, to think about how women interacted both in their communal life, but also in the lay leadership. And so I got involved in US Women, and through that started to come to understand how the US itself functions, the US Center, and how those interactions happen. And so slowly over time, with the work of many, many people, professional and lay, there were changes in the structure of and the governance of the United Synagogue, and that allowed women to be trustees. And so when that happened, I was approached to see if I would consider standing for election, which is not my natural habitat, really, elections. But I thought I have committed so much time and energy to these areas that it would be something that I couldn't think of a good reason to say no to. So I did, and that is coming up for 7 years ago. And it has been a completely fascinating journey, learning how a really big and important structure within the Jewish community functions. And I've really come to respect enormously the work that the professionals do, whether it's work through tribe or through chesed or through burial, absolutely assisted by lay leaders. But we are very, very lucky in this country to have such strong communal structures, which are protected in law and which serve more than just our own community very quietly, but are absolutely fundamental to the United Synagogue's individual synagogues.
Fascinating. So I'm just going to take you back. You mentioned 50 years ago, the United Synagogue had a place for women. There was something that was already established.
Yes. So
recognized.
So there was a group set up by some very, very feisty, wonderful, brave women to make sure that the role of women evolved. And so that was as much about allowing women to serve on synagogue boards as it was eventually to change things for the trustee positions. But it was also about making sure that life cycle events change. So they were very much involved in thinking about things like bat chayils or the creation of bat mitzvah. Obviously, individual synagogues made decisions, but this was a group of women who could share ideas and who could support one another as they tried to encourage their synagogues to do some of these things, because the world outside the synagogue world was evolving, and for many women who were starting to step into those workplaces, they were seeing a different way of doing things, and they wanted to bring as much as they could of that back to their religious homes, understanding that there are halachic rationales for things that are hard to evolve, but also understanding that some of it can be done. And so I'm still in contact with many of the women who have served on that US Women's group over the years. In fact, one of them is over 100 and as feisty as ever.
Wow.
And as, in fact, US Women evolved into a new entity over the last few years, she was one of the staunchest advocates for making sure that the voice of women wasn't lost in any changes that happened. So these are really impressive people to have sort of listened to and learned from. And many of them came from our community, and some of them, and in fact, from many of the communities local to us.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like the United Synagogue was ahead of the curve already by recognizing that there should be a place, more involvement with the women specifically. That's really fascinating. Is that name public? That woman of 100 years old? Like, is that a public knowledge or?
So I don't know if she'll want me to talk about her, but I think many will know she was honoured. The event that happened for the United Synagogue just before lockdown started, the only kind of formal event that happened, she was honoured there, and she was very touched. She went all the way to the House of Parliament to hear that honour. So no, she's an extraordinary individual who has served her local synagogue, which is St John's Wood, over many years, as well as the wider community. And her husband too was very involved in the synagogue locally, and again in the wider United Synagogue. So yeah,
that's fascinating. And so once they've established that women can become a trustee, that's when it just naturally made sense for you to join. And is there a limit on that? So you said you've been a trustee for 7 years already.
Yes. So when I started, and still to this day, the limit is 2 terms of office, so 2 election cycles. When I started, the election terms were every 3 years, so the maximum I could have done would have been 6 years. But for reasons to do with how the changeover happened of trustees, they changed that, and so now people serve for 4 years. So that's how I'm going into my 7th year. On top of the 3 years I did the first time, and I will finish at the end of, I guess, July next year, so July 2021.
So what could you tell us that is your proud moment during those 7 years, what you've been able to accomplish, I guess specifically for women per se? Because I know there are several events around women, like I know there's the U.S. Women's Dinner and.
Yes, so the US Women's Dinner and the US Women's Quiz, they are the work of US women. So they started that many years ago, and those of us who are still engaged in these issues help support it going forwards now. That's a really interesting question. What am I proud of? Do you know, I think one of the things that is really wonderful to watch is the collective response to COVID, and how that has been visible to some in the form of the chesed boxes that were sent to people, or the changes that happened in synagogues, obviously, or the changes that happened in burial to allow burials to still occur, albeit differently. But actually behind the scenes, what maybe isn't as clear to people is the amount of work that both lay people and professionals have put in. For example, with synagogue reopening, hours and hours and hours of thinking and reading policies and talking to different stakeholders and listening to people's worries and listening to what people wanted to enable a system that I'm sure you can say more about it than I can, but I think in the main has worked from the information I've seen back from different synagogues. And that's no small feat given the absolutely extraordinary, unusual circumstance we find ourselves in. And just one little bit of that in particular that I think speaks to that. So one of the things that happened in the last few years is that each synagogue now has a women's officer who is part of the executive team. So in Norrice Lea, for example, it's a vice chair of the synagogue, but in other synagogues it's slightly different. It might be someone who doesn't hold that position or that title. And today we have a WhatsApp group that is the women's officers, and they were sharing the incredibly inventive and very different ways that they have supported communities to make sure that as synagogues reopen, women were able to attend services where they wanted to, obviously, but in a safe way. And they were sending pictures of how the chairs are arranged in the ladies' sections and all sorts of things. And it may seem a small thing, but I think that at a time when it's all too easy to sometimes put different groups in the margins, the fact that actually this has managed to not be that and be an attempt to make sure that everybody in the community has access to what they need is really a profound success. And I think the other part of that is also, while some people are going back to synagogue, not everybody feels ready or can. not least because of the space that's allocated and available. And I think it's also wonderful that a lot of the things like Norrice Lea TV, but a lot of the online events that are happening that have actually engaged more people in a different way continue. And so I really hope that out of what could have been really catastrophic times, there will be a renewed vigor in Jewish life, which reaches people in a different way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no doubt that the amount, like you mentioned, the amount of time that was spent to I know Joe Gross in particular, worked with Rabbi Liss in the reopening of the shul is we owe a tremendous regard to them both, in allowing us to make that happen. And all the little things behind the scenes, you're right, a lot of us don't know what goes on, and we really appreciate all the work. So how many trustees are there in with the United Synagogue?
So there are 8 trustees, of whom one is the treasurer, and then there's a president, so Michael Goldstein. And we're split half-half. So of the treasurers, of the trustees, 4 are men, 4 are women. And they are all people who have, in the main, busy jobs. A couple of them are retired, but in the main busy jobs, they range from lawyers, dentists, doctors, people who run their own businesses. And I think that's wonderful because it brings a really broad spectrum of opinions. We don't all agree on everything, which is important, because I really do think that it's important to hear different voices and to consider them when decisions are being made. But what they hold very dear and are very profoundly committed to is maintaining the really unusual setup that is the United Synagogue. I mean, you've lived in different countries. There are very few organizations around the world that cover the areas that the United Synagogue covers and sit in the particular space that the United Synagogue sits. And I think that's something that I've really learned over the years, that the things we take for granted can't carry on unless people commit to them. That doesn't just mean going to synagogue. That doesn't just mean paying your membership. That means volunteering and serving time and grappling with the challenges that organizations face.
So what would you tell our viewers out there if, how should they look forward to or try to encourage them to become a trustee? Well, is it something that you're looking for in particular?
Oh, I'm always encouraging people to think about these roles. I would say the first thing is that it's a prerequisite at the moment that you've served on your synagogue board. So the first step is to do that. And again, I would encourage people to do that because I think it's a lovely way to get to know people of the synagogue in a different way, and often different people who you wouldn't necessarily meet, but also it's a way of giving back. So if you have skills, and they can be very broad, they can be everything from communication skills all the way through to strategy skills or skills in delivering or managing people. It's really wonderful if you can get involved at that level, and then be a little bit brave. Although there are elections, both obviously for synagogue boards, although they don't always have to happen, for trustees, again, it feels intimidating, but actually council who do the electing under the current statutes, they want to hear different views, and not always is there a competitive election, so it doesn't always have to be uncomfortable, but it's really important that people from different backgrounds step up. The elections are now every 2 years, so there's more opportunity for people at different times to do it, whereas before they were at set blocks, and now they happen every 2 years, and a certain number of trustees roll on and roll off, so it's not a complete change every few years for the whole trustee board. And I would say it's been extraordinarily eye-opening. Does take time, but I've learned a huge amount. I've met fascinating, wonderful people, and I would also say that it feeds in a positive way to the work that I do day to day. So yes, I'm a doctor, but I also have a role as someone who supports the teams that I work with. So I look after what's called a directorate, which is a third of the children's hospital, alongside a general manager and a head of nursing. And a lot of the things that I've learned through roles outside of medicine have helped me to be better at roles within medicine. So I would absolutely say to many people that actually, if you want to grow in your professional life, sometimes you don't have to do that just through your professional life. There are other ways to achieve that.
Right, absolutely. Right, because you have some people who shy away from the shul politics, because I can imagine there are quite there's quite a lot that comes up, and people are I don't want to deal with that, but I'm sure it reaps rewards in learning how to work through the different views and the different opinions around that table. And any advice on how you were able to, specifically with Norrice Lea, with the diverse community that we do have, being on a council for the shul, that must have been really different and had its challenges.
So yes, I think it's true of any role that one does, that the important thing is to listen to people, to hear their views, to respect those views even if they're not my view, and to be open to changing one's mind because someone makes strong, powerful points, to be brave, so to be decisive, and to have strong leaders around, and fellow people who are prepared to do the same. And I think to just remember the bigger picture. People can get very bogged down in the minutiae of issues, and out of that can come a lot of challenge. Whereas if we just keep holding on to the bigger picture of why was the United Synagogue created, why are we here, I think that can be quite a good way of focusing. In my professional life, the same challenges can exist, and for me, it always comes down to what do we need to do to make the patient's journey through healthcare better. And if you just keep focusing on the user in the synagogue sense, or the user in the hospital sense, is feelings as best you can, I think that's quite a helpful way of sometimes sidestepping some of the politics that inevitably do surround areas where there are difficult tasks and people have divided opinions.
Right, absolutely. Well, you definitely gave us food for thought, and Yasher Koach, and thank you for all the work that you've done for Norrice Lea, but also in generally for United Synagogue. And we really appreciate that. When personally, I can say when we first came to London and recognized that there was a body over all these shuls was really something that we recognized was something wonderful. To be able to have one uniform of guidelines of certain things of how things move along, and so we really appreciate that that a body like that can exist. So thank you. Okay.
Absolute pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and Hatzlacha and Mazel Tov for the 150th anniversary.
And thank you for all that you and your colleagues have been doing during these very strange times. It's I'm sure appreciated, and I know appreciated by many.
Well, thank you. Well, that was interesting. Interesting to hear from a woman U.S. trustee. Interesting to know that there are half and half, 4 women and 4 men on the board. So that's quite a feat for United Synagogue. And to know, we take it for granted that we're able to go to shul, even with all the guidelines, but there was a lot of preparation involved in making sure that happened. There was a lot of behind the scenes, not only the professionals, but the lay leaders, all these guidelines and policies that had to be read and worked on it with what the people wanted, what the government wanted, and hours. You can imagine how much time was spent to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's a great team working hard, both centrally and locally as well, in order to get to where we're at.
Right.
No doubt about that.
And it is. Obviously, it's very different going into shul now, but we are lucky to go there. And how do you find the mass? Did you find a better mass this week?
Oh, so yeah, I'm liking the shul. I'm loving the davening, etc. Missing the kiddush, obviously. But one thing I still can't get used to is the mask. I get why we have to do it. End of the day, it keeps us safe. So I've been experimenting different masks, and I'm afraid to say none of them let you breathe. So I've just made it more fun. So I've got several ties. This is one of my floral ones. So I've got a mask to try and coordinate with it.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a cotton one. So you should be able to breathe better in that one. Very pretty.
Yeah, not for too long. So it kind of almost goes with the tie, and also my lapel flower as well.
Oh, look at that.
Goes with it. And I've just ordered as well a whole set with a pocket tissue as well. So, you know, even though you can't breathe, you can at least make it fun as well. But one of the things is, if you're taking the service, you don't have to wear the mask, because we have a perspex screen on 3 sides of the bimmer. So I've offered to lane this week Parshas Matis Masa, which is the longest laning of the year. And so I said, I'll do the laning. That way I get to take my mask off for, you know, a good 45 minutes.
That's awesome. That's
That's
awesome.
what you have to do in order to breathe.
Are those masculine or feminine masks, or they're unisex? Where do you find those?
This particular one is unisex.
Okay.
If you go to, I can't mention, we're not allowed to advertise on Norrice Lea TV, but on the high street, and on the Google, there are many different options available.
It's good to know. I guess it's going to be now a new fashion. Before it was the fascinators.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now we're going to have.
Couldn't find matching socks though. I'm on it. We'll get there.
Right. Okay. I'm sure they'll come up with something. Wonderful. And now we're going to go to hear from Shimon Cohen of Shechita UK about the landmark case in the European Court of Justice that will impact the future of Shechita across the continent. He speaks to Rabbi Friedman. So over to you.
Shimon Cohen, welcome to Norrice Lea TV. Shimon, you are a beloved member of Hampstead Garden Suburb, no stranger to our community for decades. But today you're with us talking about an important and vital issue that is going on in Europe right now, the issue of Shechita, which is about to go, or is being dealt with in the European courts because of the ban that's already in place in Belgium. Can you speak a little to your involvement with that, how you got involved, and where things are currently up to?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me. The issue in Belgium affects the whole of European Shechita, has a huge effect on the United Kingdom as well, and will do even post-Brexit, which is why it has to be taken seriously. But it's important to understand what the issue is. First of all, it's not in Belgium. It's in 2 Belgian regions, Flanders and Wallonia. It's not a federal issue. Now, the process is that those parliaments voted to ban what they call slaughter without mechanical stunning, which involves both the Zabia Muslim method of slaughter, which produces halal, and the Jewish method of slaughter, Shechita, which produces kosher. Those 2 regional parliaments banned slaughter. We can come to the reasons why in a moment. They were challenged by both the Jewish communities and the Muslim communities in the Belgian courts to challenge whether or not the parliament had the right to impose a ban when the federal government had already signed up to European directives allowing Shechita. The court was unable to make a clear decision on this. And after a process of going through the various courts in Belgium, it's now ended up at the European Court of Justice. And the issue in the European Court of Justice is does the Belgian court have the right to impose a ban on something that was voted by their regional parliament? So it's all terribly complicated with regard to legal issues.
But this is a legal administrative issue or a human rights issue?
Well, we've tried to turn it into a human rights issue. And hence we're at the European Court of Justice. And the real reason that we've been looking at that is because the issue with regard to Shechita, which is centuries old, has got nothing to do with animal welfare. People think it has. It simply hasn't. It is false. And the evidence for such a bold statement as that is pretty clear. At the end of the 19th century, the Swiss authorities decided to ban Shechita. There was no Muslim slaughter. It was a direct attack on Jews to ban Shechita. Why? There were hardly any Jews in Switzerland. And the reason was simply they wanted to keep hardly any Jews in Switzerland. And they did not want my grandparents and your grandparents running from the pogroms in Russia and ending up in Switzerland.
So much spirituality, huh?
Simple as that. It was about population control. Stop the Jews coming to Switzerland by stopping them eating what they want to eat. They won't come, they'll go somewhere else. Actually, they did. They went to Germany primarily, and we know what happens. Now, why do I say that it had nothing to do with animal welfare? Because the first codified laws on animal welfare anywhere in Europe came 25 years after this ban in Switzerland. 25 years after. So the ban was only to do with population control. We know that for another reason. When the Nazi Party came to power and they sought to curtail Jewish activity, the first thing they did was to ban Shechita.
Interesting.
So that the Jews would leave.
Right.
That was the first plan. But unfortunately, for all sorts of reasons of assimilation and what have you, the ban on Shechita didn't actually affect Jewish life terribly much in Germany, and the Jews didn't leave. The rest we know.
Right.
And just one last point on that, just so people don't think that I've referred to the 19th century in Switzerland and the 20th century in Germany. Let's look at the 21st century in the Netherlands. The 21st century in the Netherlands, only a few years ago, one of the parties, opposition parties in the Netherlands Parliament, proposed a ban on slaughter without mechanical stunning. The party leader, although a pretty objectionable man, right-winger, banned from entering into the UK because of his views. In spite of that, he happened to be a friend of the then Israeli foreign minister. I went to see him, and I said to him, look, you're very supportive of Israel. You're very friendly with the Israeli foreign minister. Do you not understand that this ban of yours, the proposal, will affect the Jews as well? And he said, yeah, I understand that, but frankly, I hate the Jews just that little bit less than I hate the Muslims. And if I can stop them eating, then they'll go somewhere else.
Wow.
Straightforward, unashamed. So we have...
But not on the record. Not on the record.
Yeah, these bans, or proposed bans, have nothing to do with animal welfare. It's only ever been about population control.
Wow, that's awful. Now tell me, Shimon, your particular engagement with this, speak to the process. Certainly, Chief Rabbi Goldschmidt is fronting it along with the Sheikh, the head of the Muslim scholars. How are you involved and how are you moving this process along?
So I'm very close with Chief Rabbi Goldschmidt and the Conference of European Rabbis, and that is the European access for the organization in the UK that I run, which is a lobby group called Shechita UK, and we're primarily set up to promote and defend Shechita in the UK, but by the European access we get there. What we have sought to do, and it's quite unusual actually, we've sought to engage with the Muslim communities. Why I say it's quite unusual is because there are huge differences between the Shechita practice and the Zabiyah practice, huge differences. But we understand that the origins of both came from the same place, and we understand that the people who seek to ban don't really care about the huge differences. So we are sort of wrapped up together. But we generally believe that two approaches or two avenues of attack or sometimes defense are better than one. But on this occasion, because this is so central to European life, because it is targeted at Muslims, and because we have had experience of understanding when something is specifically targeted at our faith, we've sought to bring the two major religious leaders together, the Chief Rabbi Goldschmidt of the Conference of European Rabbis and the Secretary General of the Muslim World League, Sheikh Mohammed bin Ahban al-Isa, and bring them together and make joint statements. It's a very powerful lobby. We're very much hoping that the European Court, which allows these representations to be made, it's not interference in the process. We're very much hoping that the European Court will take notice of this. It will then have to be returned to the Belgian court, and we then hope things will move on from there. But it's been interesting and troubling in at the same time. I'm interested in bringing the Muslim groups together. Rabbi Goldschmidt and Sheikh Alisa had a dialogue way back in February, in the days when you were allowed to actually sit together. And we had in Berlin, in Germany, we had the two were in live conversation with a very well-known German anchorman doing the interview. And it was really somebody from Saudi Arabia, the most senior religious leader from Saudi Arabia. It was the very first time had sat publicly on a Jewish platform in this way, and the two got on extremely well. It does show that sometimes when you take the politics out of issues of faith, you can make an enormous amount of progress. So we're hoping that the strength of this lobby, as well as the work that's being done by the legal teams for both the Belgian Jewish and Muslim communities, will be successful. As it is any day now, we'll get a judgment. Difficult to say when, but then there will be some more news.
Wow, Yasha Kolach. I mean, let me ask you though about downside risk. I mean, there are not a lot of Jews in the regions where the bans have been instituted. If we lose at the European Court of Justice, does that not mean now that the anti-Semites have fuel to be able to take this further afield?
Yeah, it does. It does, very much so, Robert Friedman. My real concern is that when you look at the European scene and people talk about, I have quite a lot of conferences where people say to me, well, it's banned in most countries in Europe. And the truth of the matter, it is not banned in most countries in Europe. In fact, it's only banned in Norway and Sweden. And when you remind people why it was banned in Norway and Sweden, because those governments were fascist governments that took their lead from Berlin in the 1930s. And post the war, unlike in Germany, there was nobody left to repeal those laws in Scandinavia. That's why they exist. And I've already explained why in Switzerland there is a ban. So it's very straightforward for me to be able to say, if you want to side with the Swedish and Norwegian governments of the 1920s and 30s, then you're not someone I want to sit with.
Right.
But when we're talking about Belgium, and when we're talking about the Kingdom of Belgium and the refinement of Belgian people, and the European institutions are all based in Belgium, as we know, then it becomes a whole different story altogether. And that is the concern. It is a knock-on precedent that we have, something which would be very troubling for a country like Belgium, which we understand to be a model of Western liberal democracy, for such an attack on faith groups to be levied in Belgium and to be allowed to stand. The knock-on would be very serious indeed for all of us.
Meanwhile, the ban is in effect, and we're waiting for the ban. You're trying to overturn the ban.
Yeah, you see, we're trying to overturn the ban. It is in effect. It's causing enormous amounts of difficulty in supply, particularly during this terrible time of COVID, where Shoftim are not allowed to travel backwards and forwards between communities. The Belgian communities, for the first time, had to rely entirely on imports over the past 6 months. The ban came in at the beginning of the year. Pesach was a complete nightmare. They were ordering regularly from France. France was able to up its production. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. 40% of the French Jewish community who would ordinarily be in Israel for Pesach were not in Israel for Pesach. The demand was huge, and the French suppliers simply stopped exporting at the end of March. That caused a massive effect. So I've been arguing, or we've introduced a new legal argument, and the European Commission have actually supported us, that forcing a community to rely entirely on imports, where the evidence of a pandemic or any sort of shock to the system shows that the supply chain is not as robust as people think, forcing people to rely on imports simply is not an acceptable way to go. Particularly in an area like the European Union, which has got free trade. So there has been a problem. It is very difficult at the moment to to operate within the Belgian, to provide meat into Belgium. It's very difficult. And then you have the other side of this as well through COVID, where there are some shoctim who shecht for the UK boards, the London board and or Kedassia, but they don't live in the UK. Some of the shoctim live in Israel or live in Belgium, and they travel. We have issues relating to quarantine and movement and what have you, and therefore we're having added problems here in the UK as well. So overall, it is not a good situation. It's I have to say the London board and Kedassia and other boards are coping admirably well during this difficult time, but our eyes are set on Belgium, where forcing a community to rely entirely on imports would be very difficult indeed.
Well, that's incredible that, I mean, that we've seen what can happen so quickly. But let me ask you about the hypocrisy from their perspective. I mean, it sounds to me like they're all allowing imported meat. How did they explain that away? On the one hand, they can't do it locally. On the other hand, it's okay to import the meat. I mean, thank God.
I mean, it is indeed hypocrisy, but we have to be very careful when going down that route, actually, because we're currently involved, or I'm currently involved with the Swiss Jewish community. I mentioned before that Shechita has been banned in Switzerland since the end of the 19th century. Well, there is currently a proposal running through the Swiss federal parliament which would ban the importing into Switzerland of anything that is illegal to produce in Switzerland. Now, it is primarily due to the mink, the fur industry, and foie gras. The groups who proposed this bill have focused on those two issues. Kosher meat was not their target at all. And when this was pointed out to them that it would involve kosher meat, they sort of shrugged and said, well, sort of tough, really. So the hypocrisy, we've lived with the hypocrisy in Switzerland quite happily, for over 100 years. But that is exactly why it would be wrong, and this is proof in a way of the pudding, why it would be wrong to allow this to stand, because the idea of being able to, you can rely on imports, well, yeah, that's what the Swiss were told, and now that avenue might be drying up. Therefore, as I said, to have a restriction on Shechita within a country would be unacceptable to the Jewish community. And it's a much more lengthy subject to go into, but people should be aware that Shechita is a process for slaughtering animals for food. There are 14 other legal methods of slaughtering animals for food. For anybody to claim that one is more or less painful than the other one is difficult, because the science doesn't really show that one is more or less. Ours is our method of slaughtering animals for food. It is passed down to us. It's laid down clearly from the Torah and then through into Talmud and beyond. It's a process. It's not a ritual. There's no ritual involved. It's a process. And frankly, I've seen all processes. I've seen all the legal processes. I've seen some of the illegal processes. And at the end of the day, if you want to eat an animal, you've got to kill it first.
Well, Yashikar, thank you, Shimon, for everything you do for Anglo Jewry, for European Jewry, and as we heard from Chief Rabbi Goldstein before Shavuos, really for global Jewry. So thank you for all your efforts. It's such an honor to have you as part of our community. And Hatzlacha Rabba, keep up the fabulous work, and hopefully we will hear good news coming from the European Court of Justice. Absolutely. And that will have a knock-on effect positively, so that maybe we might see Shechita in the 21st century, even in Switzerland.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Shimon. We're very fortunate that Shimon is on top of these things. I mean, Rabbi Kuntag, we take it for granted, that meat just appears on the shelf at the butcher. There are a lot of people working, again, here diligently behind the scenes to make it all happen. I mean, I know you like your meat, right?
Oh, absolutely.
How are you going to manage during the 9 days?
I will manage. I do love a bit of cheese as well.
Right. Okay, good.
Not together, never together.
thank God we have a good team working to ensure that we have our kosher meat on those shelves. So thank you.
Yeah, and you're right, we take it for granted. You know, we're so spoiled, especially here in London. It must be about 20 kosher butchers you can go to. You know, you'll always find what you want somewhere, quality meat. But to get to that stage, a lot goes on.
Absolutely.
Now, so as with always in Norrice Lea TV, we like to share a small Torah thought. And looking through the book of Psalms, many of the chapters begin with the words Lamnatseach v'neginos mizmor, which means for the director of music we shall sing. Very interesting, referring to God, but it's an interesting way to refer to God as the director, as the conductor of music. But a nice explanation, I think, is that many musicians, extremely talented, and when you hear a 60-piece orchestra symphony, it's beautiful. But if you just isolate one person, take the bass guitar on his own, right, it would sound a bit weird, or whatever. Or the violinist who comes in every so often to do a nice high pitch, right? And the tuba, I love the tuba, goes very, very bass, right?
Do you play any instruments?
I think I can, but yeah, I wouldn't go on stage with it. It wouldn't be fair to other people. So each piece of music, each part of the orchestra on their own, don't really sound amazing on its own. But when you put them all together as a symphony, everyone plays their part, and when they all come together, it's unbelievable. And that's why we say Hashem is the conductor, because, you know, there were 7 billion people, the population of the world. Everybody is a part of that orchestra, and the world would be incomplete if just you or just I was missing from the orchestra. On our own, it wouldn't be much. Together, we're amazing. But Hashem as the conductor, and any professional musician would know, there's a difference between a 60-piece orchestra and a 59-piece orchestra. But a real professional would be able to tell the difference if one of the violins hadn't been tuned, right? So Hashem is the conductor. Hashem knows everybody what their advantages and disadvantages are, and each person has their part to play in the symphony, in the orchestra of humanity. So we're going to meet now the Ahmen boys. They've been to our shul, as you'll hear shortly. And each
just
one,
6 of them. We don't have the whole 60 group, but we have 6.
Well, 6 of them, because they're a cappella group, so there's no music, but they sing. But again, they've got a soprano, a baritone, you know, and everyone, when they sing together, and the harmony, high harmony, low harmony, beautiful. So let's go over to meet the boys.
Okay,
Yeah.
So welcome, Ahmen group. Is that what you call the Ahmen group? Amen.
Hey.
Amen a cappella singers.
Acapella singers. Welcome to Norrice Lea TV.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Nice to be here.
So
we've got Motti, Harry, Ashley, Levi, and Guy. What a crowd. Now, you're no strangers to Norrice Lea, because I don't know if you remember, but we certainly do. At Shabbat UK last year, Friday night, you did an excellent performance for us, Friday night davening, and at the dinner. Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure, that was fun.
It was one of the highlights for us of the year.
Ah, fantastic.
Unforgettable.
Yeah, you were great. You were great. So I'm just wondering how you guys have been doing. How did you get together? Do you want to just tell us how your group was formed? Motti, I believe you're one of the co-founders together with Levi, right?
Correct. So, well, Levi and I go back a long, long way. Probably to the time when, not even probably, we were toddlers, I guess. I went to Auntie Lindy, his mum. She ran a nursery, and so we'd met, I guess, as toddlers, and then we
Conveniently forgot about each other.
Immediately forgot about each other for good reason, and then kind of met again in high school in Hasmonean. And Levi was a couple of years older than me, still is. And you know, you never speak to people who are not in your age group at school. But I always saw him. He was on stage doing what I think later became Gilev, that many of your viewers, I'm sure, will be familiar with. So the birth of Gilev was actually, I believe, in Hasmonean. He'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I always saw him, and then we skirted around each other for a good few years. We always kind of knew. I went into the business, he was in the business, and it took a while before we actually met on a musical engagement. And I think he basically called me for South Hampstead Shul Choir. He needed to bolster a sort of flailing shul choir. They were struggling with numbers, and he was in need of some arranging done and bits and pieces. So I sort of came in, and before I knew it, I was writing arrangements, and they got me conducting as well. And eventually we sort of said, you know what, this is kind of fun. Why don't we actually make something of this and make this into a bit of a professional endeavor? And so Ahmen was kind of born out of that. Shul choir.
How did you come up with the name Ahmen?
Well, I think that was my doing, but it took many many variations before we got there. And in fact, it wasn't the first name. We called ourselves the Half-Eights for some reason, and then realized. Well, I think it was sort of something to do with performing at night, and it was something. It was a suggestion, and we go. Yeah, we had a logo done and everything, and then that all went in the bin, and
then suddenly it was like men.
Well, our men was. I just sort of figured that we sing a lot of ahs, and
and amen,
and you're men,
and we happen to be men. Not for any. It's not a. It's not a point of discrimination, but we sort of are and men, and I had the double connection with the word.
So how did you find all each other? So you guys knew each other, but how did you get all together?
So I'd come together with Motti, as he said, over the Shul project, and sort of felt a little frustrated in there that we had all these beautiful arrangements and so on, but we're working with a lovely Shul choir of amateurs who were doing other things during their days, and not necessarily committing to the workload of high standards and so on. So we figured that we could make a little professional group out of it. And we had someone else who was working at the Shul at the time called Ezra Burke, who's a lovely guy, and was in the group for a while, and then went off to Canada to do a conducting course, and so we had to find a replacement for him. But that was the three of us, and then Motti had a connection with Leib, and recommended him.
Leib, do you remember how we met?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes all the way back to sort of 2005, 2006. As a keyboard player, I was in various bands, and you as a drummer, I mean, you've been drumming on the Simcha scene since about the 1700s.
Guilty.
Yeah, and then, so we started doing a lot of that together and have done so over the years. And then when Ahmen was being formed, you brought me in. We did a little tryout, I enjoyed it immediately. It was a lovely thing to be part of.
So what year was that?
Get rid of him yet?
What year did the Ahmen actually form?
I think 2014. Is that right, Mott?
That's right.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Leib, where are you from originally?
So I'm a landsman of Rabbi Guttentag. I grew up in Gateshead.
Away the tune.
Proper
Man. Aye.
Geordies, way aye.
Go Northerners.
Yeah, so grew up in Gateshead. I married a girl from London, and I've been living here for 20 years. I'm in Hendon. I was in Golders Green for a while. I'm in Hendon now. Yeah. That's
Excellent. So when did the others join in?
Can I just say that Leib is by far the most famous person in the group. You know, when we're at an event, he is the Pied Piper with all the kids, because actually there's no one in Northwest London, no kid in Northwest London that Leib hasn't seemed to have taught at some point in school.
So, yeah,
He's a very fine
primary school. I've taught at.
I think, as far as I remember, Leib, when I was in high school in Gateshead, you took us for sports. That makes sense?
Very possibly. That was probably the beginning of my teaching career. I've been teaching. So I teach music in primary school, in Northwest London Jewish Day School. I also do some private music tuition around in the community. So, we're a bar and bat mitzvahs, and the kids that know me and the rest of the band are like, why are you the rock star? I think.
So you don't do this full time then?
Well, the teaching's actually very part time.
Okay.
I do this and keyboard playing in other bands, and with a bunch of these guys, with Motti, with Levy. So that makes up most of my time. That's what keeps me out of trouble, with varying degrees of success.
Nice.
And
So
so,
where are you
Guy,
from?
I actually saw you perform. I think it was at the Federation, the Zionist Federation at the Yom Ha'atzmaut.
That's
And you
correct.
did-
Yes.
That's right. So are you a cousin with Netta? That you did a great.
No connection. No connection at all. No.
You just know how to do her chicken toy song,
That's
don't you? You did a
right,
very
yes.
well rendition. You think
Were
you
you-
can do
were you
one for us now?
Were you actually there?
Yeah.
Were you actually
We saw,
going to move?
I was there with the family. Yeah, we were there. We
Oh,
saw you in
wow.
action.
It was a great night. Yeah, it was a great night.
And so that's how we know that you can do a great rendition of it. You think you could give us a little something now, or?
Yeah, go on.
Not your boy, a stupid boy, stupid boy.
Where the chicken sounds. The chicken sounds.
Is a baka baka babe, baka baka babe, baka baka. I'm not your toy.
Hey.
Awesome. Thank you. So when did you join the group?
I joined the group. Levy, I think, contacted me about 4 years ago. Is that right, Levy? Something like that.
Yeah, sounds right. I played in the band with an Israeli drummer for many years, called Kobi Israelite, and I happened to ask him if he knew any sort of Israelis around that we didn't know about, that weren't necessarily sort of involved in Northwest London Jewish community, and he mentioned that he'd done a recording session with this excellent.
Yeah, I worked with Kobe for a while on a record at the time that I tried to release, and he helped me produce it. And Kobe recommended myself to Levy, and Levy contacted me about 4 years ago, and I joined the group. I've been working with them since then. It's been great, great experience, and we've been having lots of fun traveling the world as well. We've been to Israel, to Italy, obviously all around the UK, and some of the harmonies that we sing in are quite challenging, so we need to work on it and then try to perfect it when we rehearse together. So the whole thing has been quite a nice and challenging experience, I guess.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small country. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called Israel. In Tel Aviv. I was born in Tel Aviv, and then I grew up in. My parents moved to Ramat Gan, which is sort of a suburb of Tel Aviv, if you know it.
Yeah.
And I'm there now. Actually, I'm in my parents' house now in Ramat Gan.
Oh, so Norrice Lea TV is truly international now. Look at that.
Right. Yeah. Live from Ramat Gan. Yes.
Wow.
So yeah, I came here last month because there's not much to do in London at the moment. So
It must be really tough now that, with no simchas and bar and bat mitzvahs for you guys to, I mean, that's probably your main entertainment and main income.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's right. And because of that, I decided, at least I try to enjoy the summer with my family. So I came to Israel in sort of beginning of June when they opened when they start sort of flying to Israel, because I think until then Israel was completely closed up to everywhere. You couldn't fly in. But then from June they opened the gate so you could fly. And then I'm planning on staying here till September. But back to your question, I was born, like I said, I was born in Tel Aviv, grew up in Ramat Gan, and then after the military service, I moved to New York for a year, and then to London, and been in London since.
Nice.
Amazing stuff.
Nice.
And Ashley,
Did you also do something in Amsterdam with the voice?
Yeah, I lived in Amsterdam for a couple of years. I got to do the voice, which is originally from Holland. Yeah, it's a Dutch production. So I was a finalist in The Voice, and I ended up living in. I wasn't planning on doing that. It was. It's a long story, but I ended up living in Holland, not in Amsterdam actually, in the north of Holland, in a town called Groningen. It's the sort of the northest city in Holland, and I ended up living there for almost 2 years, and sort of because of the show, and stayed there after the show for another year to try to milk the fame and success, and and after that moved back to London.
wow.
And found his true home with us.
Yeah.
You found the line. Now you found the line. Ashley, are you from London?
Yes. Well, I was actually born in Oxford because my dad used to teach at Carmel College. Don't know if you've heard of that school. It was a kind of popular Jewish boarding school in the 90s, and it got shut in 97. So we lived there, and then we moved back down to London. So I'm actually an Essex boy. So I am from more towards Gants Hill, Ilford side of things. Yeah, I get rinsed for it always by this group. They don't let me forget. But since making friends with Harry at uni, I have journeyed over to North London more times than I can remember. So now I know North London really well. And yeah, so that's me basically. How did I come into the group? It was a bit of a funny one. So a couple of years ago, I started a master's in musical direction, and that was the same time that I came into the group. So I was kind of the most sort of recent addition. And just as I was starting my course and starting Ahmen, my schedule got way too busy and hectic, and I just said, look, I can't sing at the moment. So Harry got involved. And then after I finished my training and my diary opened up again, I basically came back and have basically subbed in for various parts. I subbed for Leib, I subbed for Harry, I can sub for Motti sometimes. And on other gigs, I basically sing with everyone. So we're able to bolster the low end of the group. So often me and Harry are doubling on bass. So it's a nice little partnership to have.
So Harry, when you're not with the Ahmen group, you're with One Direction?
Congratulations on your Lifetime Achievement Award tonight. I can't speak for what you've done for the Jewish community, I wouldn't know, but by being welcomed so many times into your home and being made to feel like family, I've learned what the Jewish community is like and what it stands for, and also just what a wonderful person you are. So, congratulations on tonight. I hope you have a wonderful time. Mazel tov. And you really are my favorite ballerina.
Oops, that was the wrong video, but it was great to hear. Again, we congratulate Leora Winston on her Life Achievement Award, and now let's go back to Harry Stahl from the Ahmen group.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny enough, he has the same problem as I do. Everyone thinks that he's me, but I don't always get to hear about that. But yeah,
drop the S somehow.
Yeah, it's funny.
He added the S.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he's younger than I am, so I guess maybe I'm the original. I'd like to claim, but he's definitely got the fame over me. So yeah.
It's sometimes a bit of a disappointment for people when he turns up and they're expecting Harry Styles. Yeah.
No, I can't imagine.
Well, actually, our side of the story was that we formed at round about the same time as One Direction, and and then we found out that one of the guys in the group was Jewish. Harry Styles, right, is Jewish, and so we thought we'd get in touch with his agent, see if he wants to do something with Ahmen. Early days, he probably needed a bit of money, and anyway, they turned us down. And then Motti and I put our heads together and figured that we need to find someone called Harry Style, someone else to replace that. And then so Harry, we went on the hunt, and Harry came to us.
Yeah, he can't sing, but his name is Harry Style.
Purely fortuitous.
No, it's not Harry Styles with an S at the end, is it?
No, it's not. It is just the style. Yeah.
So how did you? So tell us about yourself. Where'd you come from? If you're not One Direction.
I'm a North Londoner. I'm a musician. I do Ahmen a lot, but I'm a pianist, singer, and I also write musicals. I've taken a couple of musicals up to the Edinburgh Fringe, and trying to get into the musical theatre world a little bit more. But I do a lot of piano teaching as well. So I've a fair amount of kids at the events that we've been singing at. I've often seen and said hello to, and I actually at Northwest with Leib sometimes I'm there just teaching the choir, so I know some of the kids as well, which is quite nice to see the kids kind of having fun at various events. But kind of doing all around work and spend a lot of time with the Ahmen folk, having a laugh at gigs and being professional at gigs as well.
But I can see there's great camaraderie between you all. You get on, have a good laugh.
We hate each other, actually, but that generally helps.
You're not split up yet. It must have been really...
This is one of the perks of COVID, you see. Not to have to actually physically be with these guys.
Right, and we can't imagine how difficult it must have been these past few months. I mean, they're only opening now the theater industry and the music industry. I mean, I don't know if we even sing yet in public. I don't know the guidelines or if they're law, but I mean, are you thinking of ways to be more creative, to create? I mean, this is obviously not, for us, the reason why we called you on is, during the 3 weeks we don't listen to musical instruments, so we said, a cappella group. What better week to start with the Ahmen group and show one of your great videos that you do with a cappella, which is great during the 3 weeks for us to be able to feature. But is there any other creative way that how are you going to? I mean, again, hopefully there will be the simchas coming up, and you will get those gigs back up and running again. But meanwhile, are there any ways that you hope to come together?
So we have we've been planning a few things. Some of them have been foiled, unfortunately, because of the guidelines. And we were hoping to do something actually last week, for example, for the 3 weeks with Chazan Avromi. I don't know if you know him, but that didn't happen, unfortunately, because of the guidelines. And I think they're still a bit unclear about whether we can actually sing as a group in shul or do any recordings and that kind of thing. But we are hopefully planning to do something for Tisha B'Av afternoon, which will be in conjunction with South Hampstead, which is kind of our surrogate home.
This the J Roots program.
If you say so.
Yeah, we're aware of that.
Right. So we're hoping to do something for Tisha B'Av afternoon, and we're preparing for that now. And so we're keeping active. It's the nature of our business is to sing. Let's be honest. And
it'd be difficult to do it behind a mask, I can imagine.
Yeah, it can be done, but obviously the performance element is key.
It would be a little prettier.
Yeah, it would help. Certainly me. But no, look, it's about connecting with people, and it's difficult to do that behind a mask. And you know,
well, I know, Motti, that I know you have a good voice from your mom, because when she does a Kabbalat Shabbat, when we have the ladies Kabbalat Shabbat in Norrice Lea, she definitely has got that voice. I know you probably got her voice for sure.
Sure, I haven't heard that voice in many years.
Oh,
but wow, I'd like to hear that. Unfortunately, I don't think I'd be invited to the women's Kabbalat Shabbat.
we could ask her to do one for you at home. She's really very powerful, sweet voice.
Well, can Guy come to do some chicken noises at the back? Can I just ask, are any of you single? I mean, I'm asking for a friend here.
Asking for a friend.
So you're married with families?
Well, I think Leib said he was married, so I think that leaves everybody else available. So it's good to know.
Lady's the only one. Lady's the only one with a heavy load.
Yeah, I'm the family man. Married, 4 kids.
In a hurry.
The rest of
Lady's
these.
the only one looking for some for you know.
The rest of these.
Lady's asking for a friend.
Right.
The rest of these youngsters, footloose and fancy free. I don't know.
Excellent. Well, very nice. So we're looking forward to hopefully hosting you guys very soon at the shul once again. And we're following this. We will feature your video where you perform together and do a great number.
And we look forward to welcoming you back in our shul whenever that may be. We want you back.
We're looking forward to it too.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
Yeah, we'd like to be there.
And before we go, if any of you you know have some of the instruments that you do, who's the one that does the beatbox?
The beatboxer.
No, you don't have a beatbox. No, the noisemakers. Is it just Guy?
We're more of a barbershop a cappella type. So it's not much of I mean, sometimes we do add a bit.
You hear the
yeah, Levy usually throws in some percussive sounds.
Come on, Levy.
I'm just looking for my my instrument over here, and I can't.
Oh, you don't use your hands.
I'll do a makeshift version with You know.
There you go. Bravo.
Whatever comes to hand.
But just before we go, Guy, can we get some more chicken noises from you just before we go?
You know what? I can do something a little bit better than a chicken noise. How about that?
Go on. What, a goose?
Okay. אוויר הרים צלול כיין וריח אורנים נישא ברוח ארבעים עם כל פעמונים ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושלו הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור.
יפה מאוד, guys.
Bravo. Well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you all for joining us, and we wish you much hatzlacha, much luck, and hopefully things will get up and running again very soon. We'll be able to sing and dance together.
Amen.
Likewise.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, what a team. You know, it's definitely something that, you know, they can, you know, during this time, difficult times when we don't have the simchas, for them to be able to perform. So we're very happy that, you know, they're able to do something for us here during the 3 weeks, as we always like to show a little musical video. But during 3 weeks of mourning, we have allowed the a cappella group. So we're going to do that. You know, Rabbi Gunther, I think they're looking for a 7th guy to join. You might want to.
Oh, what are you trying to say?
You want to go do a tryout while you're on, you know, national TV, you're live to the nation. Let's hear you. Let's hear your note. Go for it.
Think of the high one. There are Sheha Sareha I mean, who would want to?
Oh wow! Bravo, bravo! I think you're a shoo-in. So before we end, there's a lot going on this week. Tomorrow night, we join with a couple other rabbis and rebbitzins with Lord Levy. Ask any questions you want. And so, actually, it's probably too late to submit them. So, but we'll be on Facebook Live. And if you do, you can maybe email me. Maybe I'll be able to sneak it in. And Thursday, we again join with United Synagogue. We have a filming a screening of The Women's Balcony, a great film, and we're going to have a Q&A discussion with Rebbitzin Jacqueline Feldman and Joe Gross, Community and Strategic Director of the United Synagogue. So that should be quite interesting as well. And we also have Rabbi Guten Tag, a Suburb Link event.
Yeah, Suburb Link for our 20 to 30-year-olds on Thursday, 8 o'clock. We will be hearing from Lord John Mann, who's the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism. So I will be in conversation with him, discussing his own fascinating personal political journey. That'll be interesting on anti-Semitism, and this is the final in the series of the Suburb Link Zoom sessions. After that, we're going to be meeting in real people.
Excellent.
So if you're over 20 and under 30, please do join us. I will send you all. I will thank you. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. And now we're going to show a little clip that they did, a nice little a cappella video. Whatever song.
Yeah, it's a nice way to end. So thank you all for joining this week. See you again. You know, the episode numbers are creeping up. Next week is our Bar Mitzvah one, episode 13. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry, be happy. 'Cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry, be happy. 'Cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't you worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't you worry, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Don't you worry about a thing.